Okay, welcome to me exploring a little bit of Bukhansan. This is a hike or a walk that I do semi-frequently. I did try to extend it a bit longer than I normally do, and it ended up being about 7 hours long, which was sufficiently tiring for me. Here I came out of Dokbawi station, which is quite deep underground, as you can see. This was at about 6 a.m, so I got, I think, the first or the second subway of the morning. I missed sunrise because it was quite overcast. And here's some lovely older Koreans doing their early morning exercise, basking in the glory of the mountains. This is the Bukhansan temple. It's a bit redundant to say Bukhansan temple. You really could call it Bulgwang temple, I guess. And here we are officially entering the trail. So the main purpose for doing videos such as this is kind of exploring mountain culture in Korea. South Korea has a really old tradition of mountain culture, and the country's over 70% mountainous anyway, and quite heavily forested. And so going back through kind of early human history in South Korea, mountains were just geographically a physically really important part of life. Traversing them for just basic transport. They're also really important in terms of hunting and finding food. A lot of the medicinal herbs and special foods that are considered delicacies in Korea are only really found in the mountains. And it's still an important part of many people's diet is these medicinal herbs you can find in the mountains. A huge amount of Koreans hike on a regular basis, mountain sports, as maybe many people experience them in the West, like skiing and things are maybe not as popular. There's not quite enough snow here, but there's a lot of time spent in the mountains. And I'd argue that you can maybe separate the things that people do into maybe three separate categories. You have the activities people do that relate to their physical well-being. That could be the actual physical act of hiking. That could be the exercise that people do in outdoor gyms such as that. It could even be the searching for medicinal herbs and things that people do in the mountains. But there are other things that are important. For many people, there's a strong spiritual component to being in the mountains. There's the mountain spirits, the Sanshin is the other term for them, or the Korean term for them. There's a lovely quote from a book about Sanshin, the mountain spirits, by David Mason, which is, "Right at this moment as you read this page, no matter what time or season it is, mountains are being worshipped in Korea. Public and private ceremonies are being held deep in remote valleys and gorges. Shamans are chanting in front of flames high up on sacred peaks, or hikers are pausing to add stones onto cairns next to trails." I think it does serve to help understand the prevalence of mountain worship, even if it's not particularly conscious for many people, even if it's just a simple habitual behavior they may exhibit while in the mountains. There's also a lot of Buddhist monasteries in the mountains, and there's a strong tradition for people to do sort of meditation retreats into the mountains in South Korea. There's also a really important social aspect to people's hiking and spending time in the mountains. There are numerous hiking clubs, and people really enjoy hiking in quite large groups. And as part of that, there's a lot of social signaling with what clothing you choose to wear, or when and where you eat, or which trails to take, and there's sort of some complex negotiation. But it's a highly social activity, hiking for many people. And for me, this trip is a solitary journey. I'll be trying to share some of my explorations into the mountains and share a little bit about maybe what mountain culture or kind of spending time outdoors means to me and also to other people, just to get a broad view of it. I feel it's an important aspect of physical culture globally to understand. Physical culture isn't just related to the weight room. There's our actual interaction with the physical world around us. Again, I apologize if anyone's a bit sensitive to eating sounds. I know people dislike it. There's a few instances in this video of me eating. I am trying to see what birds were flying overhead. Surprise, surprise, at this time of the morning in the mountains, they are crows or ravens. I really cannot tell the difference very well, I am afraid. And so some of the routes in Bukhansan are quite well maintained. Maintained is the wrong word. There's a lot of ropes and cables and railings installed to assist on the ascent and descent, which can be quite tricky for some of the scrambles. But if you take a slightly less well-trodden path, you'll be met with some genuine scrambles to attend. And if you want to hit some of the actual peaks, there's some good single or multi-pitch climbs to do as well on some really nice, quite sticky granite. They're good climbs. I'm aware that climbing in South Korea for many people is a bit different than climbing in other places, because again, when we talked about the social aspect of mountain culture, people tend to climb in quite large groups in South Korea rather than just climber and belayer. It'll be 4 or 5 people sharing an anchor, and it sounds crazy to people who are used to climbing as a pair, but it seems to work very well in South Korea. Next time I hit the mountains, I'll try to get some footage of some of these climbing groups. As I'm sure you can hear, it is exceedingly windy at that time of the morning. Now, these don't look like it now, watching back on the video, but at the time they looked a bit like the steps to Sirith Ungol from Lord of the Rings. They do continue quite some way up past outside of the shot, actually. But this was a relatively easy part of the hike, relatively peaceful. Not many people on this route at this time in the morning. And so for me, something that I do like in the mountains is sort of the opposite of the social aspect of hiking, whereas I do think it's nice to get some solitude. On weekends, this is hard to find in the mountains, because especially in Bukhansan, it's one of the busiest national parks in the world, I believe, for its land area. It's nice crows talking, but it's easy to find solitude if you're able to take some time off during the week and go early in the morning. Again, this was a 7-hour hike. I started hiking probably, it was just after 6 a.m, maybe 6:10 or something, and I finished in the afternoon at some point. I did take water and tea with me, and I had not paid as close attention to the weather as I should have. It got far warmer later in the day than I was expecting, and I was inordinately sweaty by the end of things. Now I do, if there's a flat bit, I do like to try to do at least a little barefoot work. I normally wear fairly minimalist shoes on relatively easy trails. If I'm actually hiking in inclement weather or something genuinely quite challenging, there's no way I'd be doing it barefoot. I would be wearing proper hiking boots. But for easy trails and for easy routes, I'd use minimalist hiking shoes, or I'll go barefoot if I can. Barefoot on this granite and steps, though, even though they're fairly well trod, does slowly eat away at your feet. So I maybe had about an hour or two of being barefoot before it was almost intolerable. This rock you can see in the background is called Samobawi. And as I keep going, my feet do get progressively more and more worn out. I said worn out, I don't necessarily mean they're particularly tired in terms of the soft tissues, but genuinely the skin on the soles of my feet gets quite sensitive and sore. I think probably by this point it was getting tricky to grip on the way up on certain patches of skin. It was quite painful, and this granite here is quite abrasive. But this part of the walk is quite a nice one. There's good views from here, and it's genuinely quite pleasant to get to. It's not a super easy hike, so you'll find fewer people here than on some of the other routes. The easier routes, especially the ones which are just like a very long walk on an incline, can get very busy, even on weekdays. But yeah, some of the lesser known routes, you can be walking for a couple of hours and not see anybody else. Or you'll see one or two older Koreans who are just hiking the mountains for their own purposes. Generally, people will say hello if you say hello back to them, but occasionally you do bump into people who clearly just come to the mountains to be left alone. And when I say hello, I don't mean say hello in English, I mean try and talk to them a little bit in Korean. Okay, this is my all-time favorite hiking snack. Cucumbers. They are wonderfully refreshing to take with you on the trail, and I like to think they add a nice bit of hydration. And at this stage, everything ran out of batteries. My GoPro, my camera. This scramble is quite tricky. Without the railings, it would be almost impossible without using your hands. So yeah, and it goes on, but again, everything was out of battery, and I needed to use both hands to ascend, so it's going to cut out soon and finish with me a bit higher up. As you can see, there's fixed railings placed there. And this is a little bit of descent. And we're on this path, the old wall. And this is pretty easy. This is a section that runs quite a long way through Bukhansan, and it's a really popular trail. But it is quite easy to get to it. There's some really nice gradual walks, and it's just following kind of a ridgeline essentially. There's quite a few wild dogs in Bukhansan. They're quite cute and fluffy, and some of them really like to be fed. But I have encountered some which are less friendly, and certain areas of the trail, there's an area near one of the temples which is actually quite close to a popular hiking trail, is notorious for having quite a large pack of dogs that aren't particularly friendly. They'll leave people alone generally, but early morning I personally wouldn't feel super comfortable to spend too much time in those parts of the park. And I think at this stage, I'm looking back at some of the walk I've already done. I'm trying to just relax a little bit, but this was maybe at the 6 or 7 hour mark. I could have carried on going for a couple more hours, but I did cut it short a little bit just so I could honestly have something to eat, because I was quite hungry and thirsty at this stage, and I finished all of my tea, water and food I brought with me. Luckily, because the park is basically on the outskirts of Seoul, it is the easiest thing to exit the park and grab some food and drink. Yeah, I think it was about 7 hours 30, 7 hours 25 or something, or 7:40. I'm not quite sure. Anyway, thank you very much for watching.